Setup analysis just before the game tomorrow with Paul Dunn. So we've already played this scenario. I'm trying to get the scenario name up and running for you. Just a second, there it is. Its name is Simple Equation, and essentially the Americans at the top need to rush down to the bottom to this board here, it's board Z, and they need to occupy 25 building hexes, control 25 building hexes by the end of turn 7, and they alone will have turn 7 just for themselves. It's very convenient. Now we've already played this scenario before, and I was playing the Americans, and I didn't do too well. Too many dead squads, but eventually I did manage to win by sheer luck, I might add, by taking a 26 building. So it's too bad that I didn't actually record the vassal moves, because it was quite an exciting little game. But now we're going to switch sides, and I'm going to have to set up the Germans. The Americans here are already set up at the top, but that's just from the save game of the game that we've played. That was my setup as the Americans, and it was a fairly alright setup, I guess, but again, it's a setup that is done after the Germans set up their forces, and so obviously the setup at the top for the American player is going to be completely different. Now I've chosen this setup here, and it's an interesting setup because it's quite concentrated, full of stacking, as you can see. Lots of squads in close range. Not something that I would normally do, because it could be quite brutal, but due to the fact that these 3 buildings with the woods and the buildings at the back are kind of contiguous, there is always an opportunity to basically do some kind of a strategic withdrawal back into these building hexes and try to control the area around here. So I'll explain a little bit what's everything on the board. Now he has to take control of 25 building hexes. Now all these tokens here, all these markers, they're not residual fire. They're just, I needed numbers essentially to record how many buildings in each one of these clusters. So you can see this cluster here has 1, 2, 3, 4 building hexes. This cluster here has 12, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, etc. Now he needs 25 building hexes. So I figured if I cut through Y1 column and then the 5 row around this sort of area, I manage to control this for as long as I can, then I can give him all these buildings in case he chooses to set up around this area here. Or actually he has to set up on row 7, which is 7, 7, 7, 7, 7, 7, 7. It's this row here. But if he does choose to go through the woods and rush through there, he will not find many victory locations, because there's only 7 plus 4, 11, 12, 16, maybe 17 building hexes here. It's just not enough. He will definitely have to occupy these locations. These ones here are probably too far out for him to get as well, so I didn't even count for them. Although it is a possibility, so I'm not discounting that, but I've decided to concentrate on these ones. Now he's set up before, when we played the last time, when I was the American player and he was the German player, his setup was more dispersed. So he had a squad in FF1, some squads in CC2, some squads here, some squads there. He put his heavy machine gun here. So he wasn't doing as concentrated defense as I'm doing, but I'm gambling that I'll have a good defensive fire on him if he does try to come through here and occupy these buildings. He'll have one big defensive fire phase, which will hopefully be quite brutal, because I have a lot of firepower. And for the next turn, I'll probably sneak past the woods hex here into these buildings and try to create my backwards defense. Now a couple of things that I've set up in here. He will definitely have to go through these buildings and probably engage these guys in melee. Otherwise he's going to waste a lot of time, like I did when I played it. When I played the Americans, I wasted a lot of time. and I did have to engage in melee at the end. Now, one other thing is he's probably going to try and rush through here to this building here, because it's a pretty nice building, and if you can get to the edge, it's also covered or hindered by all these orchards, so you can easily take this building and then maybe assault move to R4 and start taking this cluster here. That's a lot of points. 4 plus 7, it's 11 points. It's quite a good cluster, both of them to occupy, because they're towards the edge. They're blocked by a lot of line of sights, kind of blind spots, and this is probably something he's going to attempt to do. So what I've done was I've put a machine gun here on R1, and they can cover this area here. So if you can see the lines of sights from R1, they will have nice lines of sights to even up to M5. It's a bit tricky, but they have really nice lines of sights here to cover this area. And even here, only with one hindrance from the orchards on S1, it's not too bad. This 436 is just there to stop him a little bit, to make him waste a little bit of time, maybe trying to concentrate fire on this building hex, P1. And now this is the crux of the defense. So K2, for example, is a very nice place with a lot of nice views. You can see the birds chirping and the dead bodies on the ground. It's quite nice, actually. Hopefully that's what's going to happen. Hopefully they're not just going to see some birds chirping. There's actually going to be some nice shots. Now also there's a couple of nice shots here to L5 and L6, as well as J5 with hindrance, true, and J6 with hindrance as well, but still pretty good shots. The one in here on J1, he's got nice shots to H4, nice shots to L4, and if I'm not mistaken I thought there was another one. Well, it also covers this hex line here if he does try to rush through the woods. Very nice, and even a couple of these woods hexes. And obviously it does have, not through here, but it does cover this area here. But the nicest thing is this one here on I2. Now I2 controls this entire road, as well as obviously this area in here, which is important to control, because as you can see I didn't put any defense there. So if he does try to rush in and I haven't actually managed to pull my forces back, it could be I could be in a bit of a fix. But like I said, he's gonna have to go through 3 squads with a light machine gun. It's gonna take him some time and a lot of smokes. Hopefully not as many smokes. Hopefully a lot of rolling 6s on the smoke DR. That's what I'm hoping for always. And on I2, the nice thing as well is it basically covers H4 and H5, and it also covers J4 and J5 with hindrance. And of course it also covers these sorts of areas there, pretty much all these 5 hexes here, which is really what I need it for as well. I've put almost my best ones. Now, my best ones there. Now, why do they have all these leaders? Is because after a turn, maybe 2 turns, depending on the situation, they're all going to fly back through here. They need the leaders, not to protect them so much from, not to help them for the morale checks, but more to give them some more movement, so I can then move 2, 4, 6 and start building my backwards defense. And again, I'm concentrating on this sort of area in here, and I'm letting go of this area there. So I've taken a decision to not worry about these building hexes. Now the scenario rules have a special rule that there's 2 buildings in here that the TEM is not +3, but because there are fortified buildings, the TEM is going to be +4. So they've got an additional fortification TEM of +1. And of course he doesn't know what the buildings are, so as you can see I've already chosen the buildings. It's going to be this one here. He chose this building when he played the gems, and for good reasons, because it's an important bottleneck towards all these hexes in here. So it's quite important to actually make him or prevent him from getting any hold on that building. Now the other building is a bit of a problem. Which one do I choose? I chose the one in here. You can see Z5, and the reason is I'm probably going to put someone with a machine gun a bit later on. If you can see, this building pretty much has almost unobstructed lines of sight to a lot of road hexes and open ground hexes. It is going to be very convenient to prevent him. If he does bring a lot of guys here to the right, to this section, you will find it difficult to move on to the left side. If he does bring a lot of guys to here and manage to take this fortified building, he will find it difficult to go through R4 and S4, hopefully. And hopefully by then, these guys here will probably move backwards as well into S5 and R5 and to stop him even further. And these guys here will hopefully move back to these locations here, and we'll be able also to control these open ground hexes all around. Now the reason I didn't put the fortification on any of these buildings, on this cluster, on that cluster, or this cluster, is because when you're talking about clusters, I believe it's very difficult to defend against them. What the opponent will just say is, well, I can't take it because the TEM is too high, +4, I'm not going to fire at it. They're just going to advance and melee. And because there's so many building hexes, they can just advance individual units into various hexes to surround. For example, W3 is surrounded by W2, X2, X3, W4, V3, etc. So they can just traverse through the buildings. Obviously they will get shot with an FFNM, so it'll only be a +2 and not a +3, but by doing so, by traversing through the buildings, they will at the very least be able to step into melee with a couple of units. So because there's not many open grounds around, it's very difficult to defend those even with a higher TEM, because he's just going to step into melee, which exactly what happened the last game. The buildings weren't fortified, but they're still +3 as stone buildings, but I still skipped them and stepped into melee and took the buildings. The best ones for this TM are those small isolated buildings with nice line of sight. That's what I think anyways. The Z5, because it's difficult for him to step into melee with all this open ground around, and it's difficult for him to evict the squad that would be occupying it because of the fortification. So that's what I sort of chose to do, and we'll play this game tomorrow, and I'll probably do another kind of AAR and record the vessel moves, and we'll see whether the defense was any good or whether that was one of the biggest mistakes that I've done. Alright, I'm out.